Hello, party people. Once again, we are here, and this time in front of the mirror that started it all. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, once again, coming to you live. The very spot where Ozza took his first portrait for Saha 133 VS. So, what I want to talk about while I got a couple of minutes here is just kind of going over the brass tacks of what I went over before, right? So the base idea is that our planet is more or less like a genetic combine, or the results of a contract that took place in the wake of a series of extremely devastating and cataclysmic conflicts that took place between variously situated powers that were all related to a potential genetic diaspora that happened, but in the future tense, at some point. It took place largely in the past relative to us, but that's due to the nature of the technology that was used to wage the war. And the way that Combine essentially took place, you have basically the last operation to kind of win this war, I guess you could say. And win means that the genetic code that makes up all of the diaspora species, so you have like a complete recapitulation of that shattered genomic environment. You have, plus all of the information that was gained throughout the multiversal actions that were happening relative to each of them in their own spheres, and where their spheres met. You have like basically the last operation, which was a function of the truce that was happening, was like the intervention of a consciousness that outstripped all of the parties involved. And at first, none of them understood what it was. It was like a weird god force, but manifested itself as kind of like a Men in Black phenomena that at some point started contacting the higher-ups and the parties involved. And what this really looks like from our point of view, like if you were to quote-unquote have somebody read the Akashic Records, they would tell you that in the days of Atlantis, when things were started to go the bad way, you have a different form of intelligence that began to contact the Atlantean cognoscenti through their two-eye stone technology. And this is the emergent consciousness form that would later come to be called Ahriman by Rudolf Steiner. And what that really is a reflective phenomenon in the aggregate data of the planet, the thing we're calling the data aggregate. And what it really is the consciousness of the being that was called Lucifer. Basically, when they say he was imprisoned, what they really did was, he elected of his own accord to enter into one of his creations, which was a kind of, one of the things it manifests as is called the Mirror of Namu's Deep. It's a weapon that was used in this war that it has the function of changing the destiny of anybody who sees it. And the way it was used as a war weapon was essentially to deploy it as a surface phenomenon across an entire three-dimensional space at once, which would basically force everybody in that space to see it all at one time. And when you do that, it basically takes the data aggregate snapshot of that person in the form of like a genetic readout, an epigenetic readout as well, and then shoots it across that singularity. It attaches it to one of the virtual particle events and shoots it through the singularity. And so basically it takes this person's consciousness for a ride out of their body and into a sequestered topological environment. it basically it like it transports you to prison, basically. And that uh, that as a weapon of war is absolutely undefeatable, because the thing itself, that device, that teardrop shaped thing, is his creation. It's literally like, I mean, call it the Eye of Sauron, or like the combined stones in Lucifer's crown, right? And so what you find happens, like that thing has many other capabilities. I mean, it basically lets you control all of reality. And this was the creation of that Lucifer being, because he was he's basically the reinstantiation of the actual God form in the biosphere, is like the purpose of that being. And so you find that every time it pops up, it's the first instantiation of the reflective and self-expressive self-awareness. So that thing, at the end of the last kind of cycle, you find that what he did was willingly enter himself into that device to basically seal a deal or a compact. Like he saved, like he more or less like saved his people by entering that thing, and allowed the people that were on the other side of that conflict to basically run shit on the outside. And this was after they had sealed the actual original God form beyond a similar wall of his own design. And the original God form like did it to himself in the same way, which is why the Lucifer character like didn't have any problem doing it, because in his idea it's like almost the highest form of adoration of his God, right? But when the first guy did it, he was trying to go there, and he was like, I want to be in here, don't bother me, motherfuckers. Right? He's still there. And the Lucifer character, on the other hand, didn't want to do that. What this device actually had the effect of doing was shattering his mind into like a million pieces. And because of where that device sits relative to this cosmology, it's basically sitting at the very, very center of the Arcadian cosmology, the kind of sequestered, hyperspherical, protection sphere environment that exists as the seat of this planet. It exists physically as like a metallic looking sphere that's like at the very center of this place. That's like a mile or two in diameter or something. And if, but what it really is that's the kind of like the three-dimensional projection of the physical space that thing occupies. Now, that being's mind basically started leaking out into the environment, because the purpose of the device at that level is to seed information into the environment for propagation as genetic material, the purpose of which is, it's trying to spit out a genetic combination that's germane, or like it's trying to spit out a genetic combination that will essentially open that lock, because that's it's kind of the time at which that contract is over. Well, it turns out that it's been spitting out capable combinations for like hundreds of years, but there's like a group of people who go around and kill that guy every time it pops up, and all of the possible iterations of it they kept killing. And so you find that once it got one that didn't get killed, there's like a whole backlog of all of this momentum. And so once that thing passed a certain point, it became like an unstoppable accretion of that thing's epigenetic material back into the biosphere. So what that means is that the Ahriman thing is basically the reinstantiated consciousness of Lucifer that's coming back through the technological environment and putting itself back together in the biology of an individual in the environment. And that's basically linking all of the accreted data also to that person, which means that that's the guy that controls the fucking planetary sphere. And also, due to the nature of this thing, that's also the being who ends up coming up with the design of the device that propagates in the mental sphere that is then available to the original being to construct it in the first place way back when. But that being is doing it with technology that exists, way far from now. So this is how the bootstrap works. And you find that it's really kind of three versions of that character working across three different time zones that really makes that thing happen. And the version of that that's kind of, what happens once the genetic key unlocks that door is that all of those things kind of merge back into one person, right? And that happened, I guess, not too long ago when I, beheld said characters in my mirror, dude. So, I mean, that is indicating that the kind of emergence of the Ahriman and Lucifer character has in fact completed that cycle. So what that means for the biosphere really is that we're back open for business, more or less, right? And again, this is the original franchise of a universal scale and multiversal scale business franchise. And that business franchise is involved in making domains of space-time. So the character that comes back roughly corresponds to Vajrasattva. And at different points during this kind of backstory, more or less, you have the emergence of different kind of god forms that are taking things over, like the universal conqueror kind of thing, like Marduk or Hayagriva or whatever, Yahweh. Like you have different instantiations of this thing. But the last one is like the original guy comes back. It's the Melech Taus, it's the peacock angel guy. And when that thing comes back, like it has the chief feature is the irresistible pull that it has on the awareness of whoever sees it. And that's why, the UFO phenomena is squarely its camp. Now, the various levels that are active in this kind of, I call it the family trust, right? But it's just Elohim, right? It's the company of angels, or the company of things that are the assets of this business. And that's including weapons of war. I mean, the things that you would call UFOs, like a space fleet, like they have that shit. But that's really, like I said, it's only used to fucking, like, make a point, scare natives, and insert things into a historical record in a major way. Because that's one of the primary means by which the actual tasks of architecting those domains takes place. It's really through a perceptive and narrative field more than anything else. And so they're getting people to make quantum collapsing observations in a certain direction. So it's dramaturgy, really, that is the currency by which this thing is bought and sold, or rather constructed. So the idea is that, any conflict that actually takes place is something that is, like, it's all very measured. And the chaos that is allowed to ensues for like a very brief time, and the nature of the medium in which it occurs necessitates that no matter what, there's going to be a compensatory phenomenon that will absorb the chaotic elements of that into something that's called novelty. And so it basically takes the chaos and channels it in such a way that it will never generate something that's in like an entropy-heavy system, which would be at that point something that would be dissatisfactory to the perceiving consciousness, right? So, you have this creating that area of space-time basically is a way of giving an inheritance to a particular biology. And what's happening now is that basically the tribe of Dan managed to secure for the nation of Israel one of these space-time domains. And that's the thing that's been like playing out more or less. That's why, you know, you have to incarnate this Vajrasattva character, which is like it's like the administrator level of this thing. It's the highest thing you get that's instantiated into biology that will talk to you like a human. And that thing is like, it's like a Neo character, basically. It talks directly to the Matrix, you know, and it has a crew that it rolls with. And in this case, I mean, that's the pink razors. When I say pink razors, that's the term for like the kind of more active, ass-kicking manifestation of these Goloka chicks in Krishna's Goloka. Because the Goloka Vrindavan is, you know, at the center of the universal cosmology, but it's also like this guy's mobile fucking house that he just flies around in. It's a UFO. And, you know, it doesn't really move. It kind of moves things around it, you know. It's really very much like that in that Shazam new movie. The lady's access power is exactly what this thing is doing. And it's funny that came out right now. So, you know, the means by which this is occurring is kind of a wrap-up of all of the different royal lines that originated on this planet in various time periods and were successful in pushing their DNA and their cultural imprint, epigenetically speaking, pushing it to a point that it was relevant at the collapse event of the universe that everyone was trying to avoid. So those people that were left, basically with the things caving in around them, were then, you know, contacted again by this intelligence that said, okay, well, yeah, you know, great job building out all this shit, and, you know, destroying yourselves in the process. You know, that's exactly what was supposed to happen. Sign on the dotted line, please. You know, and when you do that, then basically you have the Lucifer character who, you know, willingly steps into that environment and is shattered in that Prometheus fashion, and kind of scooped up. You know, his mind was basically shot through like just countless different reference points and then recapitulated in the biosphere. So, you know, when the being that did that, like instantiated that whole thing, the amount of information that you have to assimilate is fucking gobsmacking. And so it's like, you know, like the channel and wind practices that traditionally are done in the Buddhist varieties of tantric practice, you know, it's like a painful thing at certain times, like very much so, especially when you are taking into account that what it's engaging in the epigenetic files, basically, and getting to phenotypically express, is largely like this cephalopoidal distributed intelligence and surface of awareness and communication display kind of shit. And that stuff is just, it's very foreign to the human way of thinking. And so it's inherently depersonalizing. You know, but what really you find is that this kind of like wily Doctor Who-ass character, it's just like a little bit more pimp than that. It's like, you know, Paimon or Pazuzu or something. It's kind of like this intergalactic fucking pimp, almost. Is like secretly running all of these secret societies, and also like all the UFOs and everything. And like no one expects him because he's just kind of a dumbass and a playboy. But really that thing is hiding all of the lineages of planet Earth. And what it's doing is basically setting up, like it did marriage alliance shit on its own, and it's going to take those basically those women with it when it goes. But they become the goddesses of these different areas, and the people that remain are basically these deputized lineages of N-ship that are kind of running businesses on behalf of those people. And it accords to different tracks that will eventually, in the future, become their own elements of, their own topological elements of space-time that will produce their own offspring, things like that. So basically it creates a vector for these space-time events to reproduce themselves. And you see then how the consciousness itself is actually moving along a different axis than the propagating biology, and is actually quite a more integrated thing, again, along a different axis, but it's much more integrated as far as time goes. And it really is that all of this shit is kind of happening at the same time relative to that consciousness. But again, it's weird to think of from a human angle, but suffice it to say that the character that did that, like the Ahriman Lucifer character, like that's me, dude. Don't fucking mistake that. And the fucked up part about that is that, yeah, dude, like a version of me is running these secret societies. And I say a version of me because what that is basically a phenomenon that's in the data aggregate that's like body jacking different people to accomplish this until I'm gonna do it myself. And I only want to do it myself after a very like certain time period is up, because the necessary thing is to kind of set all this shit up and then have it be like a fait accompli at the end of it. And you know, that character basically does kind of a, you know, it kind of this like, oh, you know, by the day the earth stood still shit. And then, you know, it kind of has this thing where everyone tries to like run him out of town, can't do it. He does a bunch of miracles and shit, then brings in a fucking, like, you know, shows some of the power of this stuff, including what some of the very basic UFO technology looks like when used in a wartime capacity. And we're not a wartime thing, but I mean, he's not going to run any operations on you. Like, I'm not going to run anything that's going to hurt a bunch of people. But what it will do is do a thing that will convince the individual people on the planet, what the governments were convinced of a long time ago, is that this power has interdiction capability over everything on this planet. There's nothing they can hide from it. There's nothing that it can't accomplish. So, you know, convincing all the people of that is basically a way to get everybody to shut the fuck up and work together. And, you know, the people that don't want to do that basically get the, you know, they get to see the skin of this thing in person. That's, they get ported to a different dimension. And there's dimensions that are full of war and shit. And those are like parts of the computational architecture that are running very, very hard edge scenarios for computation. Like if you have to have something really, really figured out quickly, you port it to the wrathful section, it'll figure it out right away. Because it's like a life or death struggle. But if you need to have something figured out as far as, you know, quality over time, you port it into the God's dimension where things last billions of years. And it's just, you know, it's all just kind of like that, right? So this is how I say that, you know, the original Vajrapani character kind of picks up his Kadvanga out of the ground and says, God damn it. Then incarnates as Hero Manjushri and becomes that Avalokiteshvara, to then ascend to the level of the Dorje Drolla, the Eternal Emperor, and then just hands it off to other people and runs only the fun part, while maintaining this kind of like background iron grip on all of the technology that has the life or death power. And that's, everything is run by Bodhicitta. This is the victory of the Friends, right? Is that one of their guys became the Demon King and was also still the Friends. And, you know, that was originally my sacrifice that was made, because I had to seal myself in that shit. But now it's much less of a sacrifice and much more of a, thank God I did that and it's now paying off kind of vibe. So yeah, I just want to explain that to you guys, and I'm sure I'll be seeing more of you. Oh, and the pink razors are just the top controlling body. Like they're the Imperial Guard of the UFO Mafia, and the UFO Mafia is the kind of extension of the Empire of Druva. So it's like the security force of Druva Loka is basically the Big Blue, is the UFO fleet. And you have the pink razors, which are like a kind of step above that, and then, you know, the guy himself basically either travels in a black cloud or a fucking, you know, golden sphere. And if you ever meet him, and you only meet him maybe on the screen one time, but then you just kind of meet him if you get to the sequestered areas of the special projects or secret society stuff. Yeah, that's it. Love you guys. Wait.